Antonio Francisco Javier Jose Soler Ramos, usually known as Padre, that's father in the religious sense. Father Antonio Soler was a Catalan Spanish composer whose works span the late Baroque and early classical music eras. When he was 6, he entered the monastery where he studied music. When he was only 17, he was appointed Kapellmeister. When he was 23, he moved to Castile, having been admitted to the monastery there for his talents as a composer and organist. His fame led Domenico Scarlatti to accept him as a student, thus completing his high-level training. He took holy orders a year later. He was known to have 20-hour workdays, in the course of which he produced more than 500 compositions. I find these compositions to be full of humor. I hope you enjoy them. I was shocked to see the name Efrem Zimbalist. I watched him on TV, but turns out that was his kid. His granddaughter, Stephanie Zimbalist, is also an actor, but I haven't noticed her. Have you? Efrem Zimbalist Sr. was born in Russia. His father was a conductor. By the age of 9, he was first violin in his father's orchestra. It's who you know. At age 12, he entered the St. Petersburg Conservatory. He graduated from that conservatory after winning a gold medal and a Rubinstein Prize, and by age 21 was considered one of the world's greatest violinists. He settled in the United States in his early 20s. He also taught at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. He lived a long life, 96 years. I love his writing, though it's very challenging. His impression of Rachmaninoff was also very beautiful, but I had to let that one go. So much music, so little time. Here's his impression of Chopin. Speaking of Rachmaninoff, I was thrilled to see the Rocky collection I had never played before among the stack of music George Gregory gave me from his garage. I chose 2 pieces, but that got narrowed down to just the one. This one is the happier of the 2. Shortly after writing this piece, he learned of the death of his idol, Tchaikovsky. The news left him stunned, and he fell into a 3-year depression. He was prone to depression. When he was 10, his sister died. And then 2 years later, the sister who turned him on to Tchaikovsky also died. And his father left the family around this time, too, and his grandma stepped in to help raise the kids. He had begun piano at age 4. He was 20 when he wrote this piece. It's kind of funny, and it's a lot of fun to play, too. Now, this next waltz is entirely different. Triste to the max. But first, a little about the composer. Sibelius was a Finnish composer and violinist. He's widely recognized as his country's greatest composer, and his music is often credited with having helped Finland develop a national identity during its struggle for independence from Russia. What a great honor for him. One of his major successes was Valse Triste. It's one of 6 pieces of incidental music he composed for his brother-in-law's play called Kuolema, which means death. I looked up the storyline, but I didn't like it as much as my own imagination. I can hardly get through this piece without crying. I imagine a widow immersed in grief. She's fragile and broken. Sibelius captures this feeling so well because of the sustained pedal markings. The melody is broken by the disjunct pedal. I imagine her trying to come out of her deep grief and join life again. She succeeds for a little bit, but then something that someone says pulls her back down. Time passes. Then her friends talk her into trying again. This time she succeeds and actually has a good time. You can hear her getting stronger. But then her grief enters a somewhat manic and angry stage. Finally, she stops and goes back home alone. I'm going directly into the next piece about a cat as a form of consolation, for we know what a comfort our animals are. Gordon Percival Septimus Jacob was an English composer and teacher. He was born in London, the seventh son and youngest of 10 children. His father died when he was 3. In the First World War, he was taken prisoner. In the prison camp, he studied a harmony textbook in the camp library and began composing. He wrote for an orchestra of his fellow prisoners. I chose this piece because it reminds me of the early years of knowing George Gregory. One morning I walked into the music office and he said, "Would you like some coffee?" I said, "No, I don't drink coffee. My mom is Mormon and we just never had it at home, so I don't drink coffee." The next morning he said, "Would you like some coffee?" I said, "No, George, don't you remember? My mama's Mormon and we didn't have coffee around, so I don't drink coffee." And the next morning he said, "Would you like some coffee?" And I said, "Oh, I get it." You really have a dry sense of humor. This piece has a basso ostinato and much laughter in it, just like George. Okay, now we're gonna get scary for Halloween. Sergei Sergeyevich Prokofiev was inspired by hearing his mother practicing the piano in the evenings, so he wrote his first piano composition at the age of 5, an Indian Galop, which was written down by his mother. It was in the F Lydian mode, which is a major scale using all the white keys. It has a raised fourth scale degree because he felt reluctant to tackle the black notes. That's in quotes. Several years younger than most of his classmates at St. Petersburg Conservatory, Prokofiev was viewed as eccentric and arrogant. He annoyed a number of his classmates by keeping statistics on their errors. Prokofiev developed a reputation as a musical rebel, while getting praise for his original compositions, which he performed himself on the piano. Visions Fugitives are 20 pieces written when he was about 25. Some were written for specific friends. I've chosen 4 to play. You know, in some horror movies, there's a piano playing and it sounds so scary. So now let your imagination get into a Halloween frame of mind. The Warsaw Concerto is a short work for piano and orchestra by Richard Addinsell, written for the 1941 British film Dangerous Moonlight, which is about the Polish struggle against the 1939 invasion by Nazi Germany. In the States, it was released with the title Suicide Squadron. The composer, Richard Addinsell, was born in London and initially studied law before turning to a career in music. His most memorable contributions are to a series of film scores beginning in 1936. He wrote the music for the 1939 film Goodbye, Mr. Chips, and Scrooge, and This Dangerous Moonlight. The concerto was not part of the original plan. The filmmakers wanted something in the style of Rachmaninoff, but they were unable to persuade Rachmaninoff himself to write a piece. Thus, Addinsell wanted the piece to sound as much like Rachmaninoff as possible. The movie takes place at the start of World War II and tells the story of a Polish concert pianist-composer who defends his country by becoming a fighter pilot. After an air raid in Warsaw by the German army, he's discovered by an American reporter practicing the piano in a bombed-out building. The success of the film led to an immediate demand for the work, and a recording was supplied from the film's soundtrack, along with sheet music for a piano solo version. The recording was 9 minutes, and it fit perfectly on vinyl, played at 78 RPM. Those were the days. I remember playing this in high school and fantasizing of playing on a stage for an audience, and I got to do that. It's a big, flashy piece that I like to follow with another piece that I remember from my early days by Ignacio Herbert Brown, who was an American writer of popular songs, movie scores, and Broadway theater music in the 1920s through the early 1950s. Among his most enduring works are the scores for Singing in the Rain and Babes in Arms. I found it funny that Wikipedia said Brown was married at least 5 times.